Okay, and we'll get started. So, hello and welcome to Learning Development Corner, a video series where we discuss what's working in the L&D field. I'm your host, Emily Touche, and today I'm talking with the amazing Dana Bos about the intersection between L&D and company culture. So, Dana is the founder and principal of Bos Solutions. She brings a deep expertise in organizational dynamics, human performance, management, and leadership. And her insights derive from over 20 years of experience across sectors, both in business and nonprofit. And she loves seeing individuals and organizations thrive and deliver. She's an expert facilitator, trainer, and coach, and has worked with companies all over the place, global, local, large and small, as varied as Intel Corporation, International Rescue Committee, and Cape Cod Healthcare. So I'm so excited that you're here. And yeah, just thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here myself.
So we're going to actually dive into some stories from organizations who have leveraged learning and development to create a culture that they wanted. So to start off, I would just love to get into the back end of it of what's a story of a time that an organization was able to define a culture that they wanted.
Yeah, and that's really important actually to think about is an organizational culture, and simply by that I mean sort of how the organization day to day achieves things. Um, what they do and what they value day to day to achieve their goals. That's going to evolve whether you
Mm,
think about it intentionally or not. I mean,
mhm,
every group at some point, once they've been together long enough, there is a culture. It's just whether or not you've purposely and intentionally crafted it. Um, and but where you start with like, okay, what kind of culture do we want? Part of that will have to do with the values of the leader.
mhm,
And what they sort of value and perceive as a productive culture. Also, if you've done a values exercise as an organization, that can drive it. But I mean, essentially, you want to think about the end game for your organization. And again, this applies whether you're a for-profit business or a large nonprofit. What are the results that you want to deliver, or like what's the value you want to create for your customer, or however you view that sort of end client. And then what's the culture that's going to support
mm.
you in doing that?
Yeah, yeah.
And by that, it could be just what are your practices around meetings, around work hours, around what are your norms for how often managers and employees should meet one-on-one together? I mean, it's just all those little things. And so another way you want to think about it though also is like what's going to attract and retain strong talent?
Yeah.
What's going to drive employee commitment and engagement? Those things. And so a couple examples of that. I worked for an insurance company as their L&D manager, and for them the end game was the customer experience had to be phenomenal so that it built loyalty and repeat business.
Mm,
And then, so what was the culture that was going to help support that? I've also recently worked with a small biotech firm. It's developing a brand new drug therapy
okay.
for a disease. And for them, invention and innovation are quite important,
Mhm.
thinking about how we can do this in a different way, along with a lot of rigor around compliance and regulations, right?
Yeah.
I listened to a great podcast by The Economist called Boss Class, and they focused on Lego. And
Mhm.
I would love to say I've worked with Lego. I've not, but the podcast was great. I really suggest going to it because Lego, once an organization gets large enough, you might have sort of subcultures. And
Mhm.
Lego on the product development side is all about creativity, right? And so, how do you enable that so that you create this result of these cool, funky sets that people want to buy? But on the manufacturing side, it was
Mm,
about sort of discipline and speed and how do we produce this, with quality the fastest way possible. Um, and so those are just some examples of like when we want to say we want to build our culture, well, what are you building it for?
mm, yeah.
And sort of think about that. And then um, you choose your learning and development strategy.
Mm,
And a number of other things. I mean, that's not just going to inform learning and development, it's going to inform a bunch of things.
hmm
Sort of, I know, for instance, I worked for one organization that you were every year evaluated on the values and on the how you achieved your results, not just what you achieved. And it wasn't just your manager commenting on that, it was your peers. And if you were a manager, your direct reports.
mm,
So it's not just learning and development that helps
hmm
build this culture, but it can be a big piece.
Yeah. 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 I love how you pulled out those different specific values in different industries and also even within a certain company. Because I think that, yeah, it's so clear defining the outcome. And then it's kind of like, okay, well, then what pieces of the how do we tailor to help us
Yeah.
get to that outcome?
What's going to
Wow.
get us there? And
Yeah.
again, if you're not intentional about these things, practices and norms are going to evolve anyway.
Yeah.
They just might not be the ones best suited to deliver on the results you want. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So that's where it's worth being intentional.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I would love to ask you about a specific learning and development strategy you saw or contributed to in order to get to a specific cultural outcome.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So as I mentioned, learning and development won't do it alone, but it can be a real key part. And I'll give you a couple. Well, one, I want to say that there's always a technical side to learning and development. That's not necessarily what I'm talking about here, but staying up to date on regulations or law or staying on top of new developments on the science or technology side or understanding your customer's market and your customer's experience. So that's critical to
Mhm,
driving the culture you want, but that's not what I'm going to focus on here. I'm going to focus on here more sort of what can be lumped together as professional skills.
mhm,
And so this biotech company that in order for them to be developing this new, completely new drug therapy, which by the way, a few other people are trying to develop, a few other companies are trying to develop too. So
mhm.
they've got competition. Speed is important. Um, when I was working with them, the C-suite, the executives said, when I think about the behaviors that are going to help us win, we need people to be asking questions. We need people to be curious, speaking up, and we need people who are willing to bring up concerns and difficult
Yeah.
topics.
Yeah.
And so that's not unique. I hear a lot of leaders say that's what they want.
Mhm,
I think what was different about this group is they were willing to recognize that like skill development is key for that. Like just saying, I want people to ask the tough questions and I
mhm.
want people to speak up. Just saying that might not get you there. And in fact, more often than not, I've seen it not get you there. And then the leaders are really frustrated because nobody's speaking up and nobody does. And so skill development is key. No one is born knowing how to sort of initiate a difficult conversation to set it up for success. We're
Mhm.
not like born knowing that. And frankly, if you're bringing anxiety to the situation, it's going to be harder to think about how to do it. Um, Similarly, no one's born knowing how to navigate power dynamics. The CEO tells me that I'm supposed to ask questions and bring up issues, but that's a pretty intimidating person. And so, and so there is a lot of skill development you can do around sort of how to help people navigate difficult conversations, set them up for
Mhm.
success. I had an organization that I worked for. It was Intel Corporation, and they really hammered this. Like they really wanted it. And so, literally, every single employee, and this is tens of thousands of people, top to bottom, were put through a half-day course called Constructive Confrontation.
Mm,
It's about, how to bring up the difficult stuff in a way that's constructive and that's not personal or attacking.
yeah.
Um, and so that's a capability they wanted in their culture day to day, and they invested in helping people build those skills because you're not born with that stuff.
Yeah.
And I will say another example, keeping with Intel, is they wanted people to use time productively. And I think we all know that meetings can be an incredibly unproductive use of time.
Yeah.
And so again, this was going on before I got there, so do not take credit for
Mhm.
initiating this, but I was so impressed with it. Every single employee, top to bottom, tens of thousands, went through a training on effective meetings. And
Mm.
what was really remarkable to me was that across countries, cultures, top to bottom, across their manufacturing side and their product development side, everybody conducted their meetings the same way. It was very consistent and incredibly productive. Because I hear people say a lot, oh, I can't stand meeting. And what you can't stand, and I can't stand either, is an unproductive meeting.
Yeah. Yeah.
I loved meetings at Intel because we knew exactly what we were there for and what we were supposed to achieve by the end of the time.
Mm.
And then we also had people who, again, had been trained on how do you facilitate a meeting
Mm.
effectively. And it wasn't like you brought in a facilitator, just
Hmm.
everybody was trained on that.
Yeah.
So those are some examples of how you can leverage traditional kind of learning and development and training to advance the culture you want.
Mm.
There's the last one I'll say is that management training is incredibly important because it's your leadership cohort and your managers, meaning people who have direct reports, who have the most influence over culture.
Yeah.
And no one's born knowing how to lead a team or how to enable people to do their best work. And it's so key to talent retention and engagement.
Mm.
It's key to team productivity and to also just creating a consistent employee experience across the organization. And so it, this is something I do a lot of. And it's amazing to see people's eyes just light up like, oh, there is a way,
Yeah.
and actually pretty simple frameworks and
Yeah.
simple step by step. But again, it's nothing we're born knowing.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then, and what I always try to work with organizations is let's do management training, but let's not be generic. Like let's situate it in what your business challenges are right now.
Yeah.
And that's just going to yield a lot of gold in a lot of ways,
Hmm.
particularly though building the culture you want.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, those are such great examples. Yeah. I love how you really got into how having like really a specific standard operating procedure for these professional skills and then situating those within the business context is
Yeah.
like just a game changer.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of people, for instance, if you have a meeting, an approach to meetings, where you have an agenda and you do this, some people push back and be like, well, that doesn't allow for creativity or flexibility. It totally can. It's like have your plan, but then flex it if that's what the situation calls for. So it's like it's a structure, it's a framework, but it's not this formula that you're not allowed to deviate from.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's at least know what you're deviating from,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
I'm sensing like the group is really interested in discussing this, and maybe we should just do that right now. That means we're not going to get to X and Y.
Hmm.
But if you guys are cool with like putting that off to another meeting or till next week,
Yeah.
let's do it.
Yeah.
So it's just sort of being intentional in that way.
Yeah. And it really makes explicit like, hey, this is what we're here to talk about. So now when we deviate, we know what we're
The trade-off.
what
Yeah,
we're yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
Because
Instead of that just being
if you don't,
unsaid.
yeah, and if you don't do that, and again, people are born knowing how to do this. So
Hmm.
you got to be aware. You've got to have the skills, the awareness. But if you don't do that, people leave a meeting really frustrated.
Yeah.
And there's a million examples of that kind of thing where you can build build a general knowledge, understanding skill set across your organization.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So on to the last question. Um, I would love to talk about the on-the-job reinforcement. So we know that a lot of times L&D interventions can be in the classroom, there's a training and intervention, and then without that reinforcement, it doesn't have the longevity that the organization wants to see. So, do you have any stories or examples of ways that maybe these cultural goals were reinforced on the job?
Yep. Yep. And first of all, I just applaud you for asking that question because this is where folks in the L&D world can get into a sticky situation because you can have the best designed training session, or maybe it's independent, maybe it's an independent e-learning, or maybe they're job aids or whatever, and that can all be phenomenally designed. But if there's no sort of application back on the job, then it is wasted time. And application back on the job, okay, now you've been trained on this, go do it. That doesn't just happen, right? There needs to be reinforcement. One is just, and I know this sounds so basic, but it's true. Expectations need to be clear. Like
Yeah.
over the next X months, everybody's going to be trained on how to conduct meetings. And the minute you finish that, you're expected to implement it. So that it's not optional and so on. And so, you know, role modeling is key here. If that expectation is not role modeled by the leaders and the influential people in the
Mm,
organization,
yeah.
then people aren't going to do it. Or it's just going to become optional. The people who think that it is helpful will do it, and the people who don't won't.
Hmm.
So there's just got to be role modeling. Like I've seen many times that the most senior people in the organization are sort of like, it's important they do that,
Yeah.
as opposed to like, we should do it
Yeah.
too. And so I just think you really need to make your choices there. And if you're not going to role model it, then
Mm,
be realistic about what you think is going to happen.
hmm.
Similarly, like you said, just encouragement, reinforcement. Like if you want people to bring up concerns or ask the difficult questions,
Hmm.
then be ready to hear them and respond to them
Hmm.
in a way that encourages that behavior to be repeated.
Hmm.
Now, that doesn't mean you have to applaud every idea someone brings up. That doesn't mean you have to agree with every concern someone brings up. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you're willing to listen to it and then talk about why, thank you for that.
Yeah.
There's a few reasons I'm not going to take that direction, and here's why, as opposed to just crapping all over them. Because if you do, then this behavior you say you want
Yeah.
is not
Yeah.
going to happen again.
Yeah.
So, sort of encouraging it and reinforcing it when you see it.
Hmm.
And basically, like feedback and accountability have to
Hmm.
be a part of it. If you want a certain behavior around constructive confrontation, then you need to uh, sort of let people know when they're doing it and doing it well. Occasionally, it doesn't have to be constant. Similarly, there needs to be accountability when people don't do it as appropriate, when it becomes a personal attack. And I mean that sort of, no one's perfect, but if over time there is someone who is not constructive about how they are bringing up their concerns,
Yeah.
there needs to be accountability around that, or everybody's going to get cynical, you know? And then I think the last thing I'll say is there's also uh, there's also the issue of resources and information, right? Like, do people have the resources and the access to information they need to be successful?
Mm, yeah.
Because, and I'll end with two stories. There, say you're in a call center, and one of the results you want is for call wait times to be, 60 seconds or less.
Hmm.
And you're seeing the data, it's consistently not that. It is
Yeah.
consistently longer than that. The gut reaction some people have is well, what's wrong with the people taking these calls? Like, why are they taking so long? Well, we better give them some training on how to be more efficient with their
Mm,
calls. Maybe that will be helpful. Or is it just that they're at the limit given how you've staffed that center?
hmm.
Do you know what I mean? And so that's a resource issue. That's not
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
skill, that's not a skill issue. they might know perfectly well how to
Yeah.
efficiently handle customer calls, but they're not resourced appropriately.
Yeah.
And then the final one I'll give, which is humorous, is an airplane. I don't know if this is a real story, but it still is a famous one. An airplane exec flies first class on his airline. He asks for champagne. It comes in a wine glass. He can't believe they didn't serve it in the right glass. He demands everyone goes through training on what glasses to use for what kind of alcohol.
Yeah.
Everybody completes it. Everybody sort of passes a test to show they know how to do it. He gets on another plane, first class, and it comes in a wine glass. Why?
They don't have champagne
They don't
glasses
have
on
champagne
board.
glasses.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's another classic of like information and resources. And
Yeah.
be careful of jumping to the assumption that it's a skill or knowledge gap.
Hmm.
Um, and I could say a lot more, but this is my jam. This is what I love doing. But I hope that that's given some examples for how, learning and development can intersect with building the culture you want for your organization.
Mm. It absolutely has. Yeah. Yeah. I think just pulling out from those last stories, those were so great. The having the clear expectations and then being super specific. Are these expectations based on the reality of what the resources are?
Mhm.
And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I think that that question is so key of is this a skill or knowledge gap or is this a systems problem? Is this
So this is a
yeah.
very dramatic way of making this point, but it's
Mm,
effective. It's by one of the
yeah.
most sort of famous gurus, Robert Mager, in the world of like human performance.
Hmm.
And if their life depended on it, could they do it?
Yeah.
And if the answer to that is yes, then you don't have a learning and development issue. You don't have a training issue. They have the skill
Mm,
and knowledge. So if they're not doing it, it's another reason.
yeah.
And that's where we kind of come to all those other things that
Hmm.
affect how people act at work.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, this has been such a great conversation, Dana. Thank you so, so, so much for being here. You can reach out to Dana via LinkedIn. It's Dana and Bos, not two S's
Not two
for her
S's.
last name. And
Uh-huh.
then her email is bossolutions.co, bossolutions.co.
Not com. So
Not,
Dana at bosssolutions.co.
yeah. And I
Um,
will put that in the little post, LinkedIn post. And then you can also listen to her podcast, Maestro Mindset, on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
yeah, where we dig into a lot of this kind of stuff. I have a great co-host, former corporate VP at Intel on the business side. We have a lot of fun talking about these issues, and I'm happy to talk to anybody about this. I love talking shop. So anyone can just reach out and we can have a coffee chat or what have you. And Emily, thank you so much. I love that you're shining a light on all this. And I hope to see you in person sometime soon.
Yes, 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 me too. All right. Well, that's all for today. So we're gonna sign off and
See you
talk
later.
later. Bye.
Bye.